Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I'm wonderful. It's another beautiful day in what is starting out to be a crazy month in the state of Ohio and all across college football. It's just wonderful, and college football a couple days closer than it was the last time we spoke. So I guess that's also good news as well.
Magazines are hitting the bookshelves. It's looking a lot like college football waiting season and college football speculation season. And that's one of the things that we wanted to talk about today, where you and I just put together a list of our 10 breakout Buckeyes, 5 apiece. I'm sure there will be no overlapping, and I'm sure there is no reason for us to put together a list of 10 apiece for each of us. Like I know we did, just because there will, of course, be overlapping. But, we'll talk about who we think is going to be in the breakout Buckeyes in order, Tom. Did you put yours in any sort of order? I did.
I kind of went through the different positions and kind of thought through them in that order, but I did not put, level of breakout or type of breakout. So apparently we have not prepared in the same way. That's okay.
That's standard.
I feel like we should define breakout, because I feel like there's a bunch of different ways you could have breakout. Like, I think it's safe to say Chris Olave cannot be a breakout player this year because he is pretty much already broken out. Mm-hmm. Same for Garrett Wilson. Same for I don't know.
Now, I would say Jackson Smith-Njigba could still break out because he only posted 49 yards receiving last year
on 10 catches and 1 touchdown. Now, ask me why I know that. Ask me why I have that in my notes in front of me.
Why is he part of your list, Tom?
Tony, do you want to go first?
I'll let you go first.
Well, then I'll save that one for later. Now that you know.
Okay. All right, I see what you're doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, do we want to go in any kind of order in terms of degree to which a degree of surprise or
degree of surprise? No,
level of improvement over last year's performance, something like that.
Yeah, we really should not talk about show prep during the show. I went with, I guess, the guys who even though I'm looking at this level of breakout compared to what they've done previously, the bigger the breakout, the higher they are. And as I'm looking at that, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I agree with it. So that's how I did it. We can just go back and forth. I mean, it doesn't matter, because I don't want you to have to put your list in any order that you didn't intend to. Your list is yours. Mm-hmm. I don't want to tell you what to do with it. It's your list, your choice.
Okay. And okay, now that we've done our show prep meeting, we can get started recording in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Yes. All right. So I'll go first, and I will take a guy who did not throw a single football last year. Not a single one. And he only, I think he's going to have a tough time matching his yardage per carry from last year, which was 1 carry and 48 yards. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, if he averages 48 yards per carry again this year, it's not necessarily going to matter how well he throws it. But I don't think he's going to do 48 yards a carry this time. So CJ Stroud, I think, is someone who probably, it feels in my head like he played a lot more than he did last year. He played in 2 games last year, and that was it. And he played against Michigan State, and he played, 1 play against Clemson, and that was like it. So in my head, he's much more experienced than he actually is, but he seems like someone who could go from playing in 2 games and throwing 0 career passes to potentially being like a Heisman finalist this year. That's not out of the realm of possibility. So in terms of biggest potential leap, I think CJ Stroud has to be number 1 on the list. What about you?
Yeah, he was my number 1 as well. Thanks, Tom, for stealing that from me. Now I have nobody left to choose. Yeah, I just think, I wonder if maybe the reason we feel as strongly as we do is because we did see him in the spring, and he was always the number 1 guy, even though other guys got some number 1 reps. And there's no reason to doubt him. The other thing for me is Ryan Day and what he does with quarterbacks. And so there's no reason to expect, even if you take the most average season from JT Barrett and Justin Fields and Dwayne Haskins, that's a ridiculous set of numbers. Now, he's a 2nd-year player, but so is Justin Fields. I mean, Dwayne Haskins was a 3rd-year player. So I still think, 3,500 yards, 30-some touchdowns. That to me is more likely than him starting and then losing the job. I also think it'd be more likely for somebody else to beat him out than I think whoever starts is going to do really well. So I don't see somebody like losing the job. And since it looks like it's his job, he's the most obvious answer to go from nothing to 4,000 total yards.
Yeah, I think I said this coming out of the spring. It's not like I don't have 100% certainty that it's going to be CJ Stroud. I think it's going to be CJ Stroud, but I have basically 100% certainty that whoever wins the job is going to be just fine. Like they will be. I think the floor is kind of Big Ten championship level. You know, that's like about the floor for this year's team based on the 3 quarterbacks they have. And the ceiling is, you know, above that level to at least, you know, a level or two. So I can't see almost no matter who it is, even if you have an injury and you have to play your second best guy, I think you're still going to be a pretty good 11-1 kind of team this year. You know, 10-2 might be the absolute worst, and you maybe still win the Big Ten at 10-2 kind of thing.
All right. My next guy, my number 2 guy on my list is TreVeyon Mitchell, who I have penciled in as the starting will linebacker, which means he should be the leading tackler for the Buckeyes, him or the middle linebacker. Probably, I would still say it will be Mitchell. And this is a guy with 19 career tackles in his first 3 years, had none as a freshman, and then posted those numbers the last two years. So I'm expecting, you know, again, I'm saying 15 games, Tom is saying 12 games. You know, seven tackles a game. It's been a while since a Buckeye has had 100 tackles. I think maybe like Joshua Perry back in 2015. You'd have to go back that far, something like that. And I think he can get there. He's a guy that maybe I'll be interested to see if they blitz him more. It's not really always been something they do at that will spot. So I think he's going to have a fantastic year. If you've been this patient and you've waited this long and you don't make the most of it, I would be surprised by that. So he's been waiting for a reason, and I think he's going to show everybody that reason this season.
And you know, this is not a situation where, you know, this is a guy who this is his 5th year or his 4th year, and he's been behind just kind of crappy players. And it's like, why? How have you not won a job yet? Like, if you've been sitting behind Pete Werner, like, guess what? Pete Werner was a pretty darn good linebacker. So there is a reason you have not been playing so far. So that's a reasonable pick. And I think in terms of, just statistical jump, he's someone who could absolutely make that leap and put up some pretty impressive numbers this year. You could, you know, we have more names to say. I think you could make an argument for pretty much any of the linebackers for a lot of those same reasons.
Dallas Gant could be there.
Yeah, Dallas Gant last
Cody
year,
Simon.
8 games, 17 tackles, half a tackle for loss last year. Like, if he is that Mike Packer, he's going to put up some pretty big numbers this year. So yeah, you can pick pretty much any of those guys. I, however, am going to pick another guy, and this is another dividing by zero situation. So I'm pretty much guaranteed to have a significant increase in his stats. A young running back named TreVeyon Henderson, who did not get to play high school football last year. So he's not only didn't play college, didn't play high school last year, and like, you know, you don't want to get too high on a player too early based on limited looks, but he sure looks like even in a crowded running back room, he's going to be hard to keep off the field. And I think my expectation is he's at least in the rotation at the start of the season. You know, he's getting his first carry in the second quarter at Minnesota, you know, something like that. Maybe it's earlier than that. Maybe he's, you know, Master Teague starts and then he gets the second series or the third series, something like that. But he's getting first half carries in the season opener. By the time you get to early to mid-October, would it shock you at all if he was the 15 carry a game guy for Ohio State? It wouldn't shock me at all. So that seems like a guy who, you know, even if he just goes from nothing to 700 yards in kind of part-time shared responsibilities kind of duty, and, you know, 700 yards and 8 to 10 touchdowns, like that seems like a pretty darn good breakout first year to me, because that seems like it sets you up very much for sophomore year. You're the guy. Junior year, you're the guy and you're rushing for 1,800 yards, and then you're off to the NFL.
Should have done some show prep and look back at the over-unders on some of these freshmen that I set for you, because I think I had I think I had TreVeyon Henderson around like 637 yards, and I think you went under. And now you're telling me 700 yards? Like what?
I feel like I'm changing. I think we're kind of, you can adapt what your thinking is a little bit, and also, some of this is a little bit, the difference between 600 something yards and 700 yards is pretty insignificant when divided across a 15 game season. It's like, he fell forward twice more he fell forward for 3 more yards per game. Like, yeah, okay, you're pretty much there. Like that's it. So it's just a matter of, who's going to stay healthy. Is everyone going to stay healthy? Is everyone going to, is someone going to transfer? Is someone going to start fumbling the ball in fall camp and lose their spot in line? I mean, and it's possible that it's possible that Henderson gets hurt. It's possible that Henderson fumbles the ball at held. I mean, this is all possible. The margin of error on some of this stuff in a room that crowded is pretty slim. So it just, does he become the starter on October 1st? Does he become the starter on October 20th? That would make a difference too. But ultimately, I think, by the time they go to Ann Arbor, I think TreVeyon Henderson is probably the guy getting the first carries of that game.
Wow. As I was trying to figure out where to put Henderson, I surprised myself because I didn't even have him in my top 9.
Wow.
And yeah, exactly. I said the same thing. I said, wow. Because I didn't know exactly where he's going to fall into, even though I think you could start him right now and get 1,500 yards out of him, essentially just let him go do what he does. I just wonder if one of my other guys on the list is going to keep him from doing that. But first, Tom, I will go with the next person on my list, and that is Jackson Smith-Njigba. When you talk about like a statistical jump, again, 10 catches, 49 yards last year, I could see him 600-700 yards, or maybe it's like an Anthony Gonzalez 2005 where he had like 28 for 340. I think he's going to do better than that, though. I think is he the number 3 receiver statistically in this offense? I tend to think he will be over Jeremy Ruckert, and so I have to assume he's going to be like 45 catches, 600 yards, something like that. Because he's not KJ Hill where it might be just 10 yards a catch. Like he can do more. Again, yes, last year 4.9 yards a catch. I know you don't need to remind me, Tom. I threw a bunch of bad screens to him. It didn't work out. This year you can go send him downfield a little bit more and do more with him. So I have him number 3 on my list, although number 2 on this show because you stole CJ Stroud from me.
He's someone who's interesting to me because he's, he has the ability. I mean, we've been talking up his ability for more than a year now. I don't think there's a question where either of us stand on his ability. But you also have Garrett Wilson, you have Chris Olave out there. So if you have Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave out there, are you going to have what you had last year where it's just like 70% of the targets go to those 2 guys, or 80, whatever the number was, 75% go to those 2 guys? Because even if the number 1 corner is on one of those guys, they're still open all the time. So is that going to keep him from getting balls thrown to him? Or are teams going to like roll safeties over the top, kind of have de facto doubles on them sometimes? And does that then open up stuff for just missing Jackson Smith-Njigba underneath, where, he's matched up against either a slot corner or a linebacker, and there's no safety over the top, and then he just explodes for this huge season. Like, and you could kind of see that set of facts going either of those 2 ways. So yeah, I'm with you. I kind of split the difference on him. 35 catches, 500 yards, 40 catches, 600 yards, something like that. He could also be someone who is a really, really, really big red zone target for them as well.
Mm-hmm. So, Tom, it is your turn. I'm going to predict eventually you're going to say Jack Sawyer. So I don't know if you just want to do it now or whenever, but who you got next?
That's fine. I have Jack Sawyer on my list, so I will say Jack Sawyer next. So that's fine. He's I think there's a couple of guys on defense that I think you could easily pick for this, but he's someone who, again, did not play last fall. So the level of production going from 0 to something, I think, the de facto guess on what a true freshman defensive end is at Ohio State is like 3.5 sacks, something like that. I pick him to go over that, maybe 5-ish, 6-ish. I mean, what do you think is realistic for him?
Yeah, if he does 5 or 6, then now that's Nick Bosa range, and you're doing it in a rotational aspect. Like if he's your starter, then I need more than 5 or 6 out of him, even though they didn't get that out of anybody other than Chase Young and Tyquan Lewis and Sam Hubbard. It's like that the other guys who start haven't been putting up big numbers as in terms of sacks. So to expect, like if he's a starter, to expect 6 or more, I think that's a lot, but also he's supposed to be different than like all of these guys. He's supposed to be that upper tier guy. So you have to put some high expectations on him, because that's, hey, if you don't want expectations, don't be so good.
Well, and he's maybe a little bit like Henderson to me, where he's probably in the rotation at the start of the season, and you might get to October and have him be the starter somewhere. That's a tough spot to break in the starting rotation, unless you got guys injured. But if that means you have to jump over Zach Harrison or Tyreek Smith, like that's a big ask. Guys get hurt, like that happens. You get your bell rung, you miss a game or two. I mean, Tyreek Smith has been injured a decent amount during his career. Tyler Friday's been injured a decent amount during his career. If one of those guys is out, like that may be a path to the starting job. But the way Larry Johnson rotates those defensive ends, he's going to be on the field at some point. So even if he's not a starter, if he's playing a lot of those second halves, or getting meaningful snaps, playing in some second halves against teams where Ohio State's up by 3 touchdowns and very obvious passing situations for the other team, you can get a couple cheapies in those situations, especially against tired offensive linemen when you've been rotating your defensive line and they haven't been rotating their offensive line. I don't think he's getting to double-digit sacks this year or anything like that, but I think it's entirely possible he gets to 6, even if he doesn't actually start a game this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked to see where you get 1.5 or 2 sacks in a couple of games and just boost your numbers really quickly like that. That wouldn't shock me at all. My next guy, Tom, redshirt freshman running back Mayan Williams, who I think is going to go from, again, 10 carries for 64 yards last year. So the potential for 10 times that is there. And I think anytime you got the potential for 10 times something, you got to go with that. And so we always talk about how impressive he was in those 10 carries. Tony Alford said the same thing. So it's not just you and me. It's not just the fans out there. Tony Alford also said, like, yes, it was only 10 carries, but look what he did in those. It was fun to watch. It was special. And so I want to see what he does with 10 carries a game. And maybe it starts out as 7 or 8 and then eventually can become more as Master Teague does what he does, or does Master Teague ascend to Ohio State? Does he become Carlos Hyde, or is he what he is? And we'll see there. But I think Mayan Williams is my number 3 guy. Actually, my number 4, CJ Stroud, of course, again, was my number 1. But Mayan Williams is my number 4 breakout guy, because I think he's going to we haven't seen him fail yet. And again, 10 carries, yes, we know. But I'm just really excited to see what he can do with, like I said, 10 carries in a game consistently. Let him get some juices going. Let him just get a couple of series in a row and just see what he can do. Because if you do that, he may never give it back. We don't know. And I think you have to find out.
Yeah, he's such an interesting case, because in my mind, he ran it 40 times last year. Like, it's like my brain has just kind of like filled in the missing parts of the season. Like, I mean, what did he have against Illinois and Maryland last year? 20 carries each? Like, I mean, it was just you forget that they played so few games. Like, you're looking through the stats and it's like, that guy only had 9 tackles all season. How is that possible? Like, well, they only played 8 games. And, Mayan Williams was someone who we heard about as like, oh, look, this is a really impressive freshman at the beginning of the year. And then you didn't see him on the field that much, because not only did they play few games, they didn't blow teams out the way you expected them to. So there wasn't, a lot of that second half garbage time you typically have against, and you didn't play your non-conference games. So you didn't have your Ohio State 56, Akron 0 at halftime, and you've got 30 minutes of the freshman in the second half. Like, you missed all of that stuff. So he's one of those guys where you look at the stat sheet, it's like, is that right? Is that a single game, or is that the whole season? But Yeah, he's a completely viable pick because I think he's, if you made me today pick who are the three guys in the rotation for that first, the top three guys in that depth chart for the Minnesota game, it's probably Teague, Williams, Henderson, probably. They have other good options there. I think you could just as easily put Steele Chambers in this conversation because I think he's someone who could be, that's what makes this so unpredictable is this is why it's like I could easily see TreVeyon Henderson having a great freshman season and rushing for 450 yards or 700 yards or 1,200 yards. Like there are so many other variables here that I think the offensive line is going to be good enough that someone's going to put up real good numbers running behind them. But which of the guys is it? So but yeah, I think Mayan Williams is an intriguing option. There's also a possibility that Mayan Williams is, Mayan Williams' stock in Ohio State fans' heads is never as high as it is right at this exact moment because you haven't seen him fail because you haven't seen him do that much at all. You've seen little flashes where it was like, oh yeah, he was really impressive against Clemson. What did he have? Like 2 carries? Like, I mean, it's almost like judging based off of the spring game. Like, well, this guy's fantastic. Like, well, how much did you really see? So.
The loss could be huge if this is what you're investing in. It's
right.
You could lose it all.
Yeah. Now, based on what we're hearing from inside the program, based on what other guys on staff are hearing from inside the program, like they really like Mayan Williams. I think there is some there for sure. This is not just a flash in the pan thing, but people may also be a little higher on him in their minds right now than if they went back and really looked at everything that they maybe should be. Like people might be getting a little over their skis on him so far, but we'll see. Like I said, I'm saying that, and I also expect him to be maybe the second running back for that first game. So, and well in position to be the first running back at some point later in the season too.
Yeah, and like Marcus Crowley could be that guy, and he didn't make my list of 15 or 16, and that's maybe an oversight on my part, and it'll be interesting to see as we finish our top 10, like. After the season, because we always go back and grade ourselves. Like who did we miss on? Who did we overlook? And it wouldn't be a huge surprise if maybe Crowley was that for me. But so who's your next guy, Tom?
I have 2 guys, and I have to just decide which of them you're not going to pick.
Okay.
So I think I'm going to go with. I'll tell you what. Why don't you tell me if your next guy is on offense or defense? You want to tell me that?
My next guy is on defense.
Okay, good. Craig Young. So Craig Young is my next. Oh,
I should just show you my screen. That's Craig Young. That's my next guy.
Good. Craig Young, 4 games. He's another guy where it's like, yeah, Craig Young. I mean, he feels in my head like, okay, this is a guy who we've been talking about for a while. They've been talking up for a while. You've seen enough of him that you get excited about, what he could be. This feels like it's a very natural fit for him at this bullet position. And then you look at the stats, it's like, 4 games, 5 tackles last year. Like, well, that's like Craig Young had 5 more tackles than I did last year. Like that's so all that said, he just like, this just feels like this is where he should be. He is pretty much the platonic ideal for what they want in that spot. Big, rangy, quick, shifty. You could see him getting 5 sacks this year. You could see him getting 5 interceptions this year. Like it could be, and he's probably not going to do both of those things, but either one of those is possible. Or, his sacks plus interceptions adds up to 5. Like that. I think he's going to be one of those guys who he's all over the field. He also may be one of those guys who, depending, the better season he has, the better it is for the Ohio State defense. He could be one of those real linchpin guys in this Ohio State defense. So to go from 4 games and 5 tackles to potentially that makes him a pretty big breakout candidate to me.
Yeah, he's a guy who could, depending on how they use him, take over a game at points because you could just do so many different things with him. Now the execution is going to be key there, but yeah, he's a guy I have number 5 on my list, and I just expect there's been good talk about him. The potential of the position itself, I think, is intriguing to me. And then, of course, if this is the guy that's going to play there, the guy who has run, a 10.7, 10.8, 100 meters, is 6'3", 225 pounds, and has experience playing linebacker, so he's not afraid of run support, can cover. We saw him covering on the wheel route. Granted, it was, a fullback, but still, like, he's a guy who can turn and run and do a bunch of different things. I'm just interested to see how they use him. And is it aggressively in the backfield? Is it just as, you know what, just stay in a zone type of thing and just keep stuff in front of you? That would be kind of boring. I go back to Darren Lee in 2014 where he's doing all of this other stuff, and Darren Lee in 2015 where the offense kind of takes him out of it by keeping him out wide. And you kind of have to do things to get him more involved. And will they do that? And how will offenses adjust to him? So yes, I agree with you, Tom. Breakout guy. So that means my number 4 guy, who was actually my number 6 guy, but as you have taken players from me, so my number 4 guy is Tyreek Smith. And yes, I know he's started, he's experienced, he's a senior. He has, I probably should have looked up his stats, but not many sacks in his career, and I can look at him now. You look at the grades, the PFF stuff, where he was the number 2 pass rusher in this metric and the number 5 pass rusher in this metric, and yet you're like, but he had 1 sack last year, and the year before that he had 3, so that's good, 3 in 11 games, and so that gives him a total of 4 for his career. So yes. This would be, I would expect him to have more than that this year. So I guess if you double your career number in 1 year, that's a breakout. The thing is that I always get involved with, or I get sort of in arguments with people, is the comparison with Tyreek Smith and Zach Harrison, where people expect more from Zach Harrison. So like if he were to put up what the numbers say, Tyreek Smith puts up like 8 sacks this year. And if Zach Harrison would do that, you're like, should have been more. But if Tyreek Smith does it, you're like, that's tremendous. Good job, Tyreek. And there's just different expectations. And I think both are capable of a breakout. I have Zach Harrison in my list later on, but I could see and I keep comparing him since even when he committed, comparing him to Tyquan Lewis, where, he tops out at like 8.5 sacks, 16 tackles for loss, and just a really solid guy. And I expect a breakout year from him this year. He just needs to get to the quarterback. Mm-hmm. He was really good at the end of last season. What did he, the stats weren't there, and people are going to be like, oh, it's not just about sacks. I hear what you're saying, and yes, it's not just about sacks, but that's how defensive ends are measured. And you go to your analytics and tell me about his pass rush grade or whatever. Sacks are better.
They are. That is a thing where even if you force an incomplete pass, like tackling the quarterback for a loss is better than giving up an incomplete pass. So yes, but yeah, he's someone who, he's another guy who you look at the stats and it's like, is that right? Because it feels like it should have been much more than that. And he's been an impactful player, even if he hasn't been like a super, super statistically productive player. But you go through, just when I go through photos from games, it's like he's constantly right there. He's right in Trevor Lawrence's face in the Sugar Bowl. He's right in the Northwestern quarterback's face and Peyton Ramsey's face in the Big Ten championship game. There was a whole series of photos that I had from the Big Ten championship game where it's just like you see Tyreek Smith's shoulder pads because he's getting his jersey tugged so dramatically coming over the edge. That's a thing that can be a productive thing as well, because sometimes you get a holding penalty and that's not as good as a sack. It's also like that is a measure of production as well. So yeah, he's someone who I think is a good pick for this, because it seems like he's right on the cusp. Like he's a quarter second away from having 3 more sacks than he does, and it's just that little tiny bit of difference. If you have Zach Harrison coming off the edge on the other side, and you've got Haskell Garrett coming up the middle, and you've got Jack Sawyer coming off the edge on the other side, does that maybe force the other team to if they have a back chipping? Does the back sometimes have to go away from Tyreek Smith and then go block Zach Harrison? Like maybe that is that quarter second difference for him. So yeah, he's a good pick. He's someone who I could just very much see like the NFL draft next year. If he has 4 or 5 sacks this year, he could get drafted next, at least second, third round next year. And then you have, you can hear Mel Kiper on TV going, I got to question the production here. And it's like, yeah, but he's going to be a good player. So
saw Kwity Paye go in the first round.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yes. So, and I don't know that Tyreek Smith is
Jason Owe
athletically what Jason Owe and Kwity Paye were, but I mean, I think he's certainly a much more well-rounded football player than either of those guys were. So, yeah, he's going to make some money on Sundays. It's just, how is he going to get there a quarter second or a half second earlier this year than he did last year? And that's the difference here. That we're talking real fine margins here. So,
well, it's funny. He had 1 sack against Michigan State, but there's an entire series of him just beating the heck out of Trevor Lawrence in the Clemson game of photos that you took, and it's like, did he have 3 sacks in that Clemson game? No, he had none.
None.
But I see him tackling Trevor Lawrence right here. No, it's zero.
Well, and Trevor Lawrence is like flinging the ball away, and it's going towards absolutely no one. And it's like, you get off the field on a 3rd down because you forced an incomplete pass. Like that's as good as a turnover there. So, his production has not necessarily always been reflected in the stats, but he seems very much like someone that's a good pick for someone that, he's close enough that this may be the year that it starts, the stat sheet starts catching up to what he does on the field. All right, my last one, and frankly, I think we could at least do some honorable mentions after this, because I've got a couple other guys that I think we could, and I'm sure you do too, since you apparently went to like 17. My next guy, I thought for sure you were going to pick him, so I will. I think I have a type, guys who didn't do a whole heck of a lot last year, but are going to really be in a place to be first time starters, real contributors. Paris Johnson. Paris Johnson played in 5 games last year. Didn't play a whole lot. I mean, the true freshman offensive lineman, you expect a true freshman offensive lineman to not play at all or just play in just pure garbage time. Paris Johnson was playing in the college football playoff. Like, they had a couple injuries to guards, and Paris Johnson just stepped right in and played. I think he's going to go from 5 games and 0 starts to like, what's the baseline for him? 2nd team All Big Ten as a guard. I mean, I think if he's grading out as a champion most week, he's got the name recognition that I think you're going to have a 2nd, 3rd team All Big Ten season out of him, almost as your baseline of production. I don't know if it's realistic to expect like 1st team All Conference. That's probably asking a lot out of a first time starter, but he seems like he should be a very productive guard on the inside of a very good offensive line, and probably get some recognition for that. Yeah,
he was my number 8 guy, and he could have been my number 5 guy, depending on if you'd taken my number 7 guy, but you didn't. But yeah, with Paris Johnson, he has a name recognition, which if you're talking about voting for All Big Ten, at least for the media, you need, because I've done it before, and you're like, okay, you need 5 offensive linemen. I'll be honest, I don't know all of the offensive line. I don't specialize in all of the offensive linemen in the Big Ten. If there's a Wisconsin name I can't pronounce, yes, I'm going to put him on a list. Yes.
Just Google who is the 330-pound white guy for Wisconsin, and that's generally just put him at least on the 2nd team, and everyone will just kind of nod thoughtfully, like, aha, yes, you've done your research. I see.
Yes. You do watch intently, don't you? Yes, I do. So my last guy, my number 5 guy, who is actually my number 7 guy, TreVeyon Vincent, who is poised for a possibly, I keep saying like a Haskell Garrett type of season, and I'm not saying TreVeyon Vincent is going to be an All-American, but I think he can be as good as Haskell Garrett was. I was surprised that Haskell Garrett was an All-American by a couple of outlets last year, deserving, but also I think name recognition always helps when you're on the line of scrimmage. But I could see him being in the backfield, a leader of the defense. He's a guy who's been waiting forever, is finally healthy and just ready to put it all together, and has been preparing for it and hasn't gotten down because of his injuries. And we've talked about that in the past, where his dad explained to him, like, hey, this is football. This stuff happens. You just deal with it and move on and get better. And that's what he's done now. Is he at 3-tech? Is he rotating at 3-tech? Is he at nose tackle? We don't exactly know where he's going to be, but I expect he's going to be on the field a lot. Maybe they're all rotating at all of these spots on the interior of the defensive line, but I do expect him to have a very good year. I don't know what that means numbers-wise, but impact-wise, I think people are going to know who TreVeyon Vincent is a lot more than they did last year.
Yeah, he was the next guy I had on my list. He's 6 games last year, 9 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, half a sack. Interior defensive line is not a spot where you're going to run up 15 sacks. Like, that's just not you go back a couple of years and Devon Hamilton had this like incredibly dominating year and the entire interior of the defensive line. And he had like 6 sacks, something like that. I mean, it is a very difficult position to put up huge numbers. You're measuring that position more in terms of like disruption. And, every time the other team runs the ball up the middle and gains half of a yard, like, yes, you may get your credit for half of a sack or half of a tackle there. But like, that's, even if you don't get a credit for the half of the tackle, if you're pushing the guards back into the quarterback's face, into the running back's face, like you're doing your job on that interior of the defensive line. So yeah, he may be a 3-tech this year. He may play nose. He may just kind of play a little bit of both. I think they're going to do what they can to get Haskell, Garrett, and he on the field together as much as they possibly can. So, yeah, he's someone who got on the field as a freshman, started making an impact as a freshman, missed his whole sophomore year with a shoulder injury, came back, came back late last season, missed some games at the start of the year, wasn't 100% at the, when he did get on the field at the start of the year, but you sort of started to see it coming on later in the year. I think this is the year, assuming he can stay healthy, I think this is the year he puts it all together, and again, like you could go from 9 tackles to 20 tackles, 25 tackles, 2 tackles for loss to 6, 7, 8 tackles for loss. Those don't look like monumental numbers, but for an interior defensive lineman, you're making a significant impact on that game. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that's a very good pick for someone who's going to probably take that, again, if he stays healthy, I think he takes that next step and then he's off to the NFL after that.
Yeah. So I put together like a top 9, and then I had like 7 other guys that I was just reading through the roster, like, okay, mark him down. And then I ranked them. So my last guy in my top 9 was Zach Harrison. And then I didn't go to 10 because I couldn't decide I didn't want to leave TreVeyon Henderson or Jack Sawyer out of my top 10. So I just like, you know what? I'm not going to do a top 10. That way because I think both of those guys, I know like I may have them. I'm just surprised I didn't have them in my top 9. And I don't know what that means other than there's a lot of unproven players on this football team and a lot of potential for breakouts. Hence, Tom, the reason for the show. But I also had like Julian Fleming, Ryan Watts, Dallas Gant, Lathan Ransom, Josh Proctor, I think is a sneaky one because he's not really been a starter and could be the entire force for the Buckeyes in that back end as the free safety, could be the guy that keeps everything together like Jordan Fuller did. And if he can be fantastic and the corners can just be pretty good, that might be good enough. But if the corners are fantastic and the free safety is just, like that's not good enough. And so they almost need a breakout year out of Josh Proctor.
Yeah, he's someone who the ability is there, and it's just like, can he become the guy that they can rely on? And just to trust, like this is, can you be Jordan Fuller? Jordan Fuller was not, Josh Proctor is probably more athletic than Jordan Fuller, but Jordan Fuller was a better deep safety because of all the stuff Jordan Fuller just was automatic back there. And he was someone, I think, when Jordan Fuller was at Ohio State, I feel like we spent a lot of time saying, you don't appreciate how good Jordan Fuller is, but you will at some point. Like, I think this is the point when people are appreciating how good Jordan Fuller was. I'm right there with you on a number of those names you just said. The other name that I would put in there that's sort of in that Josh Proctor mold is Sevyn Banks. 8 games, 23 tackles, half a tackle for loss, 1 interception, 7 PBUs last year. If he is on that Ohio State corner track where it's, you don't play a lot, you play a season and you're just kind of okay, and then you take that next step and then you're the first round corner the next year. Like that's, and I think I've seen some NFL draft, early mock drafts for 2022 projecting him as a first round pick. And it's like, I mean, there's a lot of projection there because he's not there right now. And we didn't get to see him in the spring game because he was just a little dinged up. I don't think it was anything serious, but it was just, he sat out the spring game. So there's a little bit of projection involved here, but if he can take that next step and be, just the next guy who is the first round corner out of Ohio State, like that would again solve a lot of problems for this team. You need one of those guys to do it. And there's a lot of question marks around that corner room. Cam Brown with his health, Sevyn Banks, can he take that next step? Legend Cavazos didn't play a whole lot last year. Ryan Watts, I had Ryan Watts on my list as well. 6 games, 4 tackles last year. He's someone that, you saw the interception off of Jack Miller in that opening drive in the spring game. He's also someone that you just Nevada will have these nuggets where he's talking to people inside the program. And Ryan Watts is one of the names that he keeps hearing. Like, really, he's tall, he's athletic, can flip his hips, all the stuff you need. Can he take that next step to at least go from didn't play a lot to year 2 plays and is just okay? Like, I think he has the ability to potentially be the guy who is, again, you don't need a first team all Big Ten corner on the other side. You just need solid, okay, reliable. That's what you need. And, you're going to give up some touchdowns, and that's fine. And that's okay. Like, no corner is never beaten, but they need either Legend Cavazos or Ryan Watts to be that guy this year to, potentially be the other guy on the outside if Cam Brown is not 100%.
I can definitely see Sevyn Banks being a top 5 guy in this list of breakouts, to where he's definitely one of the top 3 corners in the draft. And just, maybe you haven't seen it yet, but we keep going back to people. The Buckeye fans were upset when Damon Arnett returned. Like, came back for his 5th year. It's like, this is just relax. Players get better, and he wasn't actually that bad last year. And then he turned out to be fantastic. And I could definitely see that for Sevyn Banks as well. It just follows the normal track. Anything else you got, Tom, before we get out of here?
I think you said Dallas Gant's name, right?
Did I really? Yes, I did.
Did you? I think you did.
Yeah. I thought you were talking as corners.
No. Yeah, on the list. I'm just zipping through my list. Yeah, I think you, between you and I, we think we've covered most of the good candidates here. So, yep.
And we left out all of the bad ones. So,
and as Urban Meyer was very fond of saying, potential just means you haven't done anything yet. So there's a lot of that on this list, but this is the fun time of year to start dreaming on guys, because there's so much raw talent here. And you go through the recruiting ranking. It's like CJ Stroud, 5-star, TreVeyon Henderson, 5-star, Jack Sawyer, 5-star, Paris Johnson, 5-star, Deron Vincent, 5-star. Like, these are guys who you've been hearing about for a few years. Taraja Mitchell was a 4-star, but you've been hearing about Taraja Mitchell for literally 4 years now. This is now finally the chance to see it, see whether he can do it on the field or not. Like, this is going to be a really, really interesting year for Ohio State football, because, you've got the years where you've got the whole team coming back and everyone's, they're all loaded for bear and everyone's excited for a national championship. This year, you have the possibility, you have the potential on the team to be that level of team. But there's a lot of questions that have to be answered. Those are some of the more interesting seasons to me.
Yeah, and like 25 months from now, you'll get to edit your rosters on NCAA football and just play these rosters on your video game system, on your PS7. It's going to be a grand time. I look forward to it. That was also one of the great things about summer is, July is when the game comes out. Of course, now it will eventually be back, and you got magazines, you got video games. College football is a year-round thing. It's just nothing better. So, Tom, I think that will do it for today. We've discussed our breakout players. We did it fairly and back and forth, which was good. I think I'm probably more correct than you, except for the ones where you picked the ones where I also wanted. Then you were also correct there. So, good job on that. And apparently, I don't think TreVeyon Henderson or Jack Sawyer are going to do much of anything this year, which is strange, to be honest. But, what are you going to do? So thank you all for listening. Make sure to check out BuckeyeScoop.com, where there's stuff happening right now and every day after that and every day before. So we're heading up on, Tom, happy anniversary of BuckeyeScoop.com. June 4th, launched in 2020. We should have spent an hour on that, but maybe we can on another show.
That's going to be Friday's Morning Scoop. We'll have probably Mark and Bill on to talk about the first year of the site. Because I had them on for the very first episode of the Morning Scoop on June 4th, 2020. So yeah, that'll be a fun conversation, because it was like, I think time has become extremely relative for all of us over the span of the last year, but it's like, how has that only been a year? It feels like we've been doing this for 5 years now. So yeah, it has been quite an adventure of a first year, but like a really fun, exciting first year, an awesome team to be a part of. A lot of fun, a lot of good times, and now that the world is opening back up, it seems like we may have even more fun and be able to do a lot more stuff this year, which is going to be great.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. So thank you all for listening. Thank you guys for watching, and we will talk to you later.